Hello, and welcome to the Shine More podcast, where we are shining a light on all things special education with a passion to help those with special needs and a mission to empower individuals with various abilities. Today's guest is Mrs. Ivy Pratt. I consider her to be a transition expert. She's been working in the field of transition as a teacher for 6 years. She is currently a coach supporting other teachers, and she has, I believe, overall about 19 years of experience working in the field of special education. So I want to go ahead and welcome you to Shine More Podcast.
Thank you.
And I wanted to get started with just finding out from you.
Okay.
How would you say a transition classroom differs from a typical ESE classroom?
Well, a transition classroom is different, completely different from a gen ed classroom because our transition classroom focus basically on our students transitioning to an employment independent skills. So in our classroom consists of broken up into centers. And in those centers, you will have a domestic center where they work on hygiene, domestic issues, maybe folding clothes, washing dishes, ironing. It can be any form of the domestic. We also do have our vocational center, which focuses men on clerical work. So if your child is looking at doing clerical work into the employment opportunities, then that is what we focus on learning. So they learn how to file, answer phones, basically kind of go into typing, data entry. So we have our classroom set up into those. We also in our classrooms have a form called micro enterprise. That is where our students then learn how to create a product or basically in order to sell them at home. So sometimes when we go through our students, when they go home and they at the day program, or if they're living at home, then they go ahead and they have an opportunity to purchase things and then they make them. So some of them look at making beads, necklaces, jewelry, and some of those might be an employment opportunity that they can do at home where they're self-employed.
Okay.
So that's where it's a little bit different than our gen ed setting. It's more focused on employment skills and independent skills.
Okay. Okay. And tell us a little bit more about the population that you service.
Okay, so I service a large variety of population. I do IND, ASD, EBD. I do basically all of it. There is a difference in working with students with EBD versus ASD. So a lot of our students that I'm working at now, their cognitive level is low. So we do, just because your student or your child is performing at maybe at a lower cognitive cognitive level, they still have an opportunity and they can still be employable. We just go at it about a different way. We break the activities down into chunks in order for them to learn that task. So I do work right now with population between 18 and 22, but I have worked with from as low as first grade.
Okay. Okay. And as a transition teacher, what would you say is your primary goal to prepare your students for life after school? Also to prepare your parents, the family members, or whoever may be taking care of that young adult.
Right. So our focus here is to work on independence. The more independent your child is, then the more successful that we can look for employment, or maybe if they go into a day program. So what I focus on is basically their hygiene. Basically, are they potty trained? The communication, we look, can they use their communication devices? We also look as when they communicate, do they use their picture communication system? Meaning they use pictures to communicate to others. So we really want to focus on those aspects because the more independent they are, then the more opportunities they will have, not just in an employment setting, but just also in life in general. So if they are basically learning to go grocery shopping, if they're looking at going to the mall, any of those activities there, we really focus on those aspects and how they can be independent of doing those things.
Okay. And I heard you mention day program or even employment. Can you give a little bit more insight on what the different settings may look like? First off, starting with the day
Mhm.
program.
Yes. So what we do is basically there is a difference between the employment and the day program. So some of our students we go through a career path with our parents, and we figure out what is the best way your son or daughter might we look at them going. So they might look at going down the career path of a day program. A day program is the place where your son or daughter goes from 9 to 2. So a lot of our day programs are not all day. In those day programs, it kind of resembles a little bit of the classroom settings, but you want to make sure you go and you look at everyday program because everyday program is different. A lot of those programs do provide employment opportunities, but if not, then we also have vocational rehabilitation that you can seek there of looking for there. We also did day programs. Some of them offer the CBI, community-based instruction, where your child goes out into the community and they go to maybe to the mall, the grocery store, or just certain kind of items. A lot of the day programs then just kind of work on not just so much the educational skills, but more about the independent skills. So that is a little bit difference between the day programs. They are 9 to 2. A lot of the day programs do not provide transportation. Some do, but not all. So you really want to focus and find that out. A lot of them do not provide. Some do not provide food for your son or daughter. So you will have to make sure they pack their lunch. So you want to focus on then is if your son and daughter can unpack their lunch, open their containers or juices, can they eat by themselves? So a lot of they do provide support, but the more independent they are, then it's just a little bit different with the day program.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier about hygiene,
Mhm.
and I know that includes everything, toileting needs and all of that.
Yes.
Can you explain what you have observed? Because I know you've gone out to different sites, you've seen
Mhm,
different
mhm,
day
mhm,
programs.
mhm.
If an individual may not be able to use the toilet on their own independently,
Correct, correct.
how may that impact them, or do they have different types of day programs that may take an individual that may still be in or need assistance with toileting where there are
Right,
others who can go on
right.
their
So there are different day programs. You will definitely need to inquire when you do go to the different ones. They do, when you have day programs, you might have a 1-to-3 ratio, 1-to-10 ratio. It might be a 1-to-15 ratio. It depends on your child's eligibility and the support that they need. Now, they do have day programs where they will provide support with your son and daughter with their hygiene needs. As far as helping them change their pull-up, as far as, flushing the toilet, as
own.
far as washing their hands. So they do have some day programs like that. But a lot of the day programs I am finding are the ones who are really focusing who have already been potty trained. So
Okay.
the more independent they are, I find that you have more opportunities, shall we
Mm-hmm.
say. So when I do go out, the first thing they want to do is ask me is, hey, is your son or daughter potty trained? The
Mm-hmm.
next thing they want to do is they want to say, how do they communicate? They also want to do is look at behaviors. Do your son or daughter have a behavior? If your son or daughter does have a behavior, then that is a different, you might be looking at different day programs. But
Mm-hmm.
again, you need to inquire with that because your support will change with that.
Okay. Okay. And I know that there's something called a life plan that
Yes,
transition teachers
yes.
use. Can you explain that to us?
Yes. So the life plan is something that happens at all school districts, which we're affiliated where I work. So what that plan does is basically it's a team. The
Mm-hmm.
team consists of the transition teacher. It can be also your transition specialist, and then your parents. So what you do is you create a career path. The
Mm-hmm.
career path, you sit down and you determine which is the best career path for your son or daughter. If your career path is you starting out employment, volunteer work, and you're going down that career path, and you see that that might not be the best way, and then you might redirect to a day program. You want everybody at that life plan meeting to be on the same page and to provide that support. You also want to invite to that meeting is your support coordinator. That
Mm-hmm.
support coordinator is also directly from APD, Agency for Persons with Disability.
Okay.
They will then help you to provide that support that you might need or resources. So make sure you want to start your life plan meeting Don't wait until your son or daughter are aging out at the age of
Mhm.
22. You want to start as probably as early as the age of 20. Then you have more opportunities to look at the different day programs. You then want to then keep communicating with your transition teacher. You can also do that in your IEP meetings and just keep updating that information and then tell them, this is my career path we're looking at going. But again, remember that career path can always change. So you just want, the more information you know, the better you're just
Mhm.
able to work with your son or daughter.
Okay. And I know in the state of Florida, the transition IEP or the TIEP starts at age 12 and of
Correct.
course goes into until
Hmm.
the child or the adult at this point is 22.
Correct.
When do you start to do or implement the life plan? When do you start that process with the parents and the
Um,
individual?
Right. We start usually about the age of 20,
Okay.
but I prefer to, you can even start as early as 18 as soon as they enter the transition.
Hmm.
A lot of our G parents, they're like, wow, 12 is such a young age, but
Right.
always start thinking about it.
Hmm.
Don't wait until now. The life plan, we start about the age of 18, 20, but
Okay.
I would start looking and focusing as early as when the IEP starts, the TIP starts.
Hmm.
Start looking at those employment skills. What can they do? We'll look at their community skills. So when you go to those meetings and you talk to your teachers, start that early and just
Hmm.
start thinking about, hey, there's a career I want to start looking. Ask your son or daughter, what do they like to do? There are wonderful, wonderful different kind of interests to find out their interests. And
Hmm.
there's surveys that your teacher can do to find out, what do they like? Do they like working outside? Do they like working indoors due to their sensory issues? So you always, always, always want to remember your son or daughter's sensory issues, because
Hmm.
that can play a huge part of where they go
Yeah.
as far as employment, the career pathway. I did do place a little girl, sorry, a teenager,
Hmm.
and she did not like the outside. So we more focused on indoor employment.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure you're aware of those. Also, when you look at employment, you want to look at the duration and frequency. How long can they work? You
Hmm.
know, can they work for those 2 hours? And then are they going to make sure you have a timer or something on their watch to indicate it's time for their break? When they
Hmm.
do go to their break, you want to then also want to make sure that, hey, that they return back from that break in 15 minutes. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of aspects you want to really consider if you're going down that employment or that volunteer pathway. But again, those are all determined at your son or daughter's life plan meeting.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned about timers and breaks,
Right.
which reminds me in the classroom setting, a transition classroom setting, why it's so important that that classroom should mirror
Right.
that kind of environment and getting the individual used to that. So can you kind of go into that a little bit further?
Yes.
What did you do as a teacher, or how do you coach teachers to make sure that you are, kind of using those different techniques,
Right.
strategies for
Right.
those individuals?
So that's a great question. So what I do is, when I was in the classroom or when I coached my teachers and we are in the transition classroom and we are working on employment skill, let's say a volunteer skill, that is what maybe the child is looking at the interest of doing. I will put a timer on there where they are going to work for 15, 20 minutes. The
Okay.
timer goes on, and then they then transition to another task. So that might be a domestic task. And then
Mhm.
that again will be 15 or 20 minutes. You also want to always increase as your son and daughter starts doing well, and you find that they're able to work even longer periods of time. Don't just keep them into that 15 minutes. Again, the goal is for them to work maybe for about that hour and a half, if they're able to do that. And then what happens is you just increase it. So instead of 15, might go 20 minutes, then 20 go 25, and so forth and so forth. As they do get to that point where they're able to work maybe that hour, 2 hours, and then that timer simply goes off, then they know you then have what you call an individual schedule. That is the schedule they can carry with them even wherever they go. So if they're going to work on, let's say they're working in a grocery store and they're bagging groceries for an hour and a half, that timer will go off on their watch. It is now time for their break. They can have a simple schedule just near them or somewhere in their workstation where then they're going to move it and then they're going to go to their break. They can then go to their break area, set their timer again for 15 minutes, and then have them return back to break. So that's why they're so important to have those timers implemented into a classroom. Again, when our students do go to lunch, there is always they're eating lunch for 30 minutes. When that 30 minutes is up, you want to make sure that timer goes off for them to start cleaning up,
Right.
and then for them to return back to, even in day programs, employment skills, wherever they are, their lunch break is only for a duration of time.
Mhm.
So you want to be mindful, especially at that time. Hey, it is time to start packing up. You might even have someone working with them, even in their classrooms now. Say, hey, we have 5 minutes to go. We have 4 minutes to go. So that son or your child starts winding it down. Hey, it's about time. When that timer goes off, we're done with lunch. So
Right.
I have done that with my students before, and it has been just very successful. But again, you just do it in a certain amount of duration of time.
Keep that routine going so they're used to it.
Routine and structured is very key the whole
Okay.
time. Yes.
Okay. And let me ask you about CBI or
Okay.
community-based instruction.
Yes.
As a transition teacher, how important is that for the individual as they're preparing to eventually graduate, exit, and transition to post-secondary?
Okay, so it's called community-based instruction, and you will see them all over your son and daughter's IEP, and starts at the age of 12 TIEP, and you'll see a community goal. And you need to ask yourself, why is that community goal so important? Because that goal helps them to go out into the community. So if you're your son and daughter going to the community and there's a goal, maybe they're having a hard time transitioning, maybe from the bus just to that community site. It might be the mall, the park, that then becomes a goal. So then you might also look at if they're in the mall and they're looking at making a purchasing an item. So you want to then do that as a CBI or community goal is, hey, I'm going to purchase an exchange of money. You might have that as a goal. You might have as simple as a goal. They will stay with their group. A lot of our students do when they go out into the community. They might take off, they might run, or they load from their designated area. You want that as a community goal. As the years go on, and then they reach the age of 18, of 22, then they're now able to go out to the community successfully and not independently, but also with support. But they are able then to transition not only from the bus to the community site, but also maybe during that work task or that leisure activity that they are doing in the community. So you just want to make sure, start looking at that community goal when you go to your IEP meetings, and that's what it does. It just structures more when they do go out into the community. Because again, we're trying to look for independence, but when they're on the community, they will always have support. But we just want them to be able to go in the community and also remember, how do they communicate? So a lot of time our devices are in the classrooms, but make sure your son or device or daughter takes their community devices or however they communicate to out there to the community, whether it's pictures, devices, AAC device, a low tech device, make sure it goes out with them because they also need their voice in the community.
Mhm. Okay. I think that's all that I have for you. Is there anything that you can think of that may be beneficial to share for parents, caregivers, or individuals, for themselves?
Right. I think the biggest thing I would say is start early.
Mhm.
Inquire about all the different resources that we do have in Florida. There's a large variety of them. Please inquire, talk to your teachers. Look at those goals when you go to your IEP meetings. Really look at them and figure, are these really the best goals that are aligned for my son and daughter? A
Mhm.
lot of times we put so much trust in our teachers, we just believe them. And we're like, oh, that's a good goal. Yes. And they sign up on that IEP. But if you really go and you read the plot, and that's the performance level of performance, and you
Mhm.
really look at it. Did they do an assessment on my son and daughter that is aligned with that IEP goal? So
Mhm.
take that time, inquire, ask questions, and
Mhm.
then make sure you look at that data. So you can look at your son and daughter's data every quarter and
Right.
just see how are they doing. Look at
Mhm.
that progress report. Really look at it, and is that what they're saying aligns with your IEP goals? And then at the end, when you have that annual IEP meeting, asked to look at their data from the previous IEP goals.
Mm-hmm.
Did they successfully meet it? If not, you want to say, why didn't they meet that? What are you doing? And how can my son or daughter meet that goal?
Yes.
So that's what my biggest thing is, making sure you look at that. Please, please look at your life plan meeting. If you do not have a life plan meeting and your son or daughter is about the age of 18 to 20, inquire, I want a life plan meeting. And let's start thinking about what's the best goal or pathway for your son or daughter. And again, those resources are out there. And then just start trying to inquire. There's so many different organizations. And so I would just see, the more you know,
right,
the better you are.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much, Mrs. Pratt.
I
just want to just end by saying some of the nuggets that I took away from what Ms. Pratt just mentioned. Just make sure that you are aware as best as you can. I always say you are your child's or your young adult child. You are their best advocate. Make sure you are aware of what's going on in that TIEP. And also make sure take it seriously, because I know, especially for some individuals who are low cognitively, maybe nonverbal. I know sometimes you think, I mean, what are they going to do when they graduate? You know, are they just going to stay home? Are they not going to go anywhere? But there are options, as Ms. Pratt mentioned. So just make sure that you start looking into those options so that your son or daughter will be prepared, and so that you as the individual will be prepared as best as you can, just to be successful at your pace, wherever that pace may be for you.
Right. And I also want to do is, just because you feel your son and daughter are low, right, and are cognitively low, does not mean they won't have those opportunities. You just really need to zone in and focus with that teacher. Hey, what can we do to get my son or daughter to be independent? So I just want to say that that was the way I've always taught. No matter how the child came to me, I did my best to show progress. Every student that left me always had progress, and I communicated with my parents, and I said, you know what? A lot of my parents are like, I don't think they can do that, Miss Pratt. I think you're kind of, no, let's try. Let's try. And that is always my everything I say to my parents, let's try. Let's see what happens. And always, all my students have always shown progress.
Right. I've seen it for myself. She's telling the truth. All right. Thank you so much.
Miss Moore, have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.